The Maximum Happiness and Wellbeing course, Part 1, Session 10, Emotions and Feelings. Understand how your feelings and emotions colour the thoughts that you have and affect the decisions you make and the outcomes that you achieve. Discover how to use your emotions to generate energy and improve the quality and quantity of the happiness that you attract. This session starts with one of our favourite quotes: "If we learn to identify, express and harness our feelings, even the most challenging ones, we can use those emotions to help us create positive, satisfying lives." Feelings versus emotions. So let's go back to basics. What's the difference between a feeling and an emotion? There are many long and complex answers to this question. Most of them are incomprehensible. Having waded through technical books on the brain, hundreds of articles on psychology and physiology, and spent hours on the internet in search of a simple, easy to understand solution, we reverted to the faithful old dictionary. A feeling is an emotional state or reaction. An emotion is a strong feeling such as joy, love, anger or fear. These are two different words. Whilst they may overlap in their meaning, it's important to be able to separate the two distinctly if we are to understand their respective effects on our happiness more fully. My favourite conclusion is this: an emotion is the experience of happiness, love, sadness, fear and anger. A feeling describes the changes that occur as a result of the emotion. So let's look at the components of emotion. The subjective experience of happiness, sadness, anger and so on. The physiological changes involve the autonomic nervous system, the ANS as it's called, and the endocrine system, over which we have little conscious control. However, we may become aware of some of their effects, such as butterflies in the stomach or goose pimples and sweating, and the associated behaviours such as smiling, crying, frowning, running away and being frozen to the spot. Basic emotions. Research suggests there are 4 physiologically distinct conscious emotions, and they are anger, fear, happiness and sadness. The autonomic nervous system, the ANS that we just mentioned a few seconds ago, acts quickly, within a hundredth of a second, sending nerve impulses immediately to the parts of the body that need to react. The endocrine system, which means inside secretions, works through endocrine glands that generally secrete special chemicals into the blood system, affecting the glands of the body. So the ANS effectively sends impulses from the brain. The endocrine system sends chemicals into the blood system. So this is the two parts that stick together. It's worth talking about some of the aspects of this, like dopamine. Dopamine is a key player in our emotional experiences. Excites and is involved in movement, attention and learning. You've heard of serotonin, no doubt, which is another important chemical, and it's released during arousal, dreaming, moods, appetite and sensitivity. Serotonin is released during arousal, dreaming, moods, appetite and sensitivity. The endocrine system generally has a slower reaction time than the autonomic nervous system, which takes seconds or minutes to respond, but it has a longer lasting effect on our behaviour. So how do feelings work? When we feel, our personal energy resonates with the energy of the event or the person causing the feeling. This is similar to how our eardrums vibrate at the same frequency of a sound that we hear, enable us to hear each sound. When we experience an event or interaction with someone, pleasant or otherwise, our bodily systems record our reactions by generating feelings that have the same empathic resonance. Now, feelings are not the same as emotions. Feelings exist only in the current moment as a response to present circumstances, whereas emotions linger. Although feelings are subtle and light, emotions can be disruptive because of their physiological effects. Feelings do not release energy. Emotions do. They release energy for use in choices such as fight or flight or some other physical act. Feelings are simply vibrations of energy. It's only our interpretation and judgment that causes us to separate them as good or bad feelings. The anatomy of emotion. Emotions are generated in the limbic system, a cluster of structures that lie beneath the cortex of the human brain. The two-way traffic between the limbic system and the cortex allows emotions to be consciously felt and conscious thoughts to affect those emotions. Each emotion is produced by a different network of brain modules, including the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. These control the hormones that produce physical reactions such as increased heart rate and muscle contraction. So let's look at fear versus anger. Fear and anger trigger the release of hormones in the body that prepares us to deal with threats, triggering fight or flight. In the modern world, however, long-term anxiety can cause overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system and lead to health problems. Feelings and emotions energize your thoughts. By visualizing a mental image of a desired object or situation, you can increase its attraction to you, and in this way change and shape your life, behaviour and circumstances. Questions for you. What would make you take action? A lifeless thought or one charged with emotion? I think you know the answer. What kind of speaker magnetises your attention? Someone who talks in a boring, monotone, lethargic manner, or one who talks with passion and emotion? And again, I think you know the answer to that. People, actions and thoughts charged with the energy of emotion make a more substantial impact. Mixing emotions with your thoughts is essential to make your thoughts a reality. Thoughts with emotional energy have a more significant effect and can drive them into action. Let's talk now about fear and love. There are hundreds of individual emotions, but only two motivational drivers: love and fear. Love or fear are the main drivers behind most of what you do or don't do. The actions that you take, the decisions that you make, your perceptions and your views and reactions to things. Not surprisingly, our mental programming and conditioning produce consequences here too. We engage in far more activity to avoid fear than to satisfy desire, and this is a fact of life. We spend more of our time trying to avoid fearful, unpleasant circumstances than we do trying to attract more desirable circumstances. Fear of all types paralyses so many of us. So what are the common fears that we subject ourselves to? The common ones are poverty or loss, criticism or disapproval, ill health, being taken advantage of, failure and rejection. It's a sad reflection on society that despite the opportunities for abundance and happiness that exist today, more so than ever before in mankind's history, so many of us are trapped in thoughts tinged with fear. Energy attracts energy in the form of circumstances and people. It follows that the more you desire or fear something, the more likely you are to attract it in your life. An emotionless thought has no power to influence you one way or the other. An emotionless thought causes frustration and unhappiness. When you have clarity of thought, positive or negative, accompanied by an intense emotion of either fear or desire, you set the wheels of energy to attract whatever it is towards you. The maxim is, reject fear, choose love. This is a popular refrain, and it's the most wonderful advice we can give. Something we've touched on earlier in the course is something called the negative bias of the brain. Did you know that the human brain remembers more negative memories than positive ones? And this is due to something called the negativity bias of the brain, which is set up as a defense mechanism for us. Let's look at the negative bias of the brain in more detail. Have you ever found yourself dwelling on an insult or fixating on your mistakes? Criticisms often have a greater impact than compliments, and bad news frequently draws more attention than good. as we've seen from the media attention and the media focus on more negative issues in the news articles that we see, rather than positive, happier articles. This is because adverse events have a more significant impact on our brains than positive ones. Psychologists refer to this as the negative bias, which can affect your behaviour, decisions and relationships. The negative bias is the notion that things of a more negative nature, unpleasant thoughts, emotions or social interactions, harmful or traumatic events, even when of equal intensity, have a more significant effect on one's psychological state and processes than neutral or positive things. In other words, something very positive will generally impact a person's behaviour and cognition less than something equally emotional but negative. A simple example is how losing £20, a £20 note, feels so much more painful than the equivalent joy of finding a £20 note. It's now proven in the human brain that negative thoughts are effectively double the positive ones. The individual inability to reverse the effect in our mind is down to our tendency toward positive or negative thinking and actions. If we receive a compliment from someone, then a criticism from someone else, the two don't neutralise each other. We feel twice as bad about the criticism as we feel good about the compliment. The criticism would leave a stronger emotional mark. It's how well we cope with reversing the effect that counts, and this is done by positive action like vocalising appreciation rather than mere positive thinking. Our brains are hardwired to expect negativity. This formation of a negative mental bias in the brain dates back to the caveman days when we needed to be prepared for attack or threat. These out-of-date mental hang-ups obstruct our path to happiness. So, how do we overcome the negativity bias in the brain? The negativity bias can cause you to dwell on dark thoughts, hurt your relationships with loved ones, and make it difficult to maintain an optimistic viewpoint. Fortunately, there are steps that you can take to change your thinking. Here are some of the things that you can do. Stop the negative self-talk. Think thoughts of love, dismiss fear. Pay attention to your thoughts. Change your perceptions as explained in session 9 of this course. Use the perception cycle to change the negative thoughts that we have into more positive ones. Reframe the situation. Look for a more positive angle on things. Establish new patterns. Look for an uplifting activity to pull yourself out of the negative mindset. Savour positive moments. Because it takes more for a positive experience to be remembered, it's essential to give it extra attention to good things that happen. When negative things might be quickly transferred and stored in your long-term memory, you need to make more of an effort to get the same effect from happy moments and experiences. So when something great happens, take a moment to focus and dwell on it. Replay the moment several times in your memory. Focus on the wonderful feelings the memory evokes. This isn't selfish thinking. This is you protecting your brain, protecting your thoughts, protecting your mindset, and overcoming the negativity bias that naturally exists. The negative bias can have a powerful impact on your behaviour, but being aware of it means that you can take steps to adopt a more positive outlook in life. The emotional brain. So how does our brain process emotions? What happens to emotions within the brain? Which parts of the brain play what parts? What do they do? What does each part do? Within the course notes there is an image of the brain and the respective important parts of the brain that deal with emotions. And the image illustrates the key issues of the human brain that are affected by and instrumental in experiencing emotions. What follows explains the biological processing of what happens to emotion when they enter and pass through the brain. Now, please bear with me because I'm going to make references to certain biological parts of the brain and I'll try and explain them as simply as I can. We start off with something called the cingulate cortex. This is the part of the cortex closest to the limbic system, and it performs complex tasks or experiencing intense love, anger or lust, and causes activity in a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. This area is active when mothers hear their infants cry, and it contains unusual neurons called spindle cells, which may be particularly concerned with detecting how others feel and reacting to their emotions. You'll hear more of the functions of the anterior cingulate cortex in this session on the brain and love. Another part of the brain is called the stria terminalis. This is part of the network of pathways that link the amygdala to other parts of the brain. The stria terminalis plays a part in the anxiety and stress responses. Cell density differs in men and women, and men may play a part in gender identification. For example, transgender people have been found to have a cell structure that matches the typical pattern of the sex to which they are changing. Frontal cortex. The information from the limbic system is fed to the frontal cortex to produce conscious feelings. In contrast, conscious knowledge about the environment is fed from the cortex back to the limbic system in a continuous loop. The effect of emotion on thought is stronger than vice versa, because more nerve tracts carry signals up from the limbic system than pass signals back down. The corpus callosum. The corpus callosum plays an important role in transmitting emotions between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. Women on average have a greater density of fibres in the corpus callosum than men, and this may amount for some differences between the sexes in emotional responses. You'll learn in a later session on the brain about how the woman's brain or female brain is different from the male brain, and how even the thoughts and feelings and emotions that we have differ and why they differ. The hypothalamus and the mammillary body. The hypothalamus is a tiny part of the brain but has a complex and widespread effect. It acts as a hormonal signaler and transmitter, affecting bodily reactions to the environment and causing the sensations we feel as emotions. It also mediates the fear reaction made by the amygdala. The mammillary bodies, which connect to the hippocampus via the fornix, lie at the interface between memory and emotion. The amygdala. This is a really, really important part of the brain. It's a tiny part of the brain, found most centrally and exclusively concerned with emotion. This area assesses external and internal information to threat level and emotional significance. A lot of the responses and reactions that we have in life emotionally are sourced from the amygdala. The amygdala is also covered in later sections in the course because the size of the amygdala can determine a person's capacity for emotional response, and also, for example, it's been proven that recidivist criminals, people who are actively involved in criminality on a regular basis, day in, day out, have little remorse, and therefore their amygdala is seen to be a lot smaller because its emotional content required is smaller, because they have less need for a larger amygdala to provide a greater degree of remorse for their activities. That is just one example of what the amygdala does, but the amygdala is also actively involved in the emotions that we feel for things like love and hate, fear and anger. Hippocampus, that's a strange name for a part of the brain, but the hippocampus is mainly concerned with encoding and retrieving our memories. Personal or episodic memories include an emotional component, so the hippocampus, by calling these up, creates a replay of emotions from the past. These may blend with current emotions or override them when a sudden memory of something sad blights a happy moment. The thalamus. The thalamus acts as a distribution centre for incoming information and is therefore involved in more or less every activity. However, some thalamic nuclei have a powerful influence on emotions because they shunt emotionally salient stimuli to the appropriate limbic area, such as the amygdala and the olfactory cortex, for further processing. The olfactory complex. The olfactory bulbs carry messages about smell straight to the limbic areas, unlike the pathways serving the other senses, which pass signals via the thalamus to the cortex for processing. This is why scents create such an intense, instant emotional response. The olfactory complex is thought to be the brain's original emotion centre and is believed to have evolved before sight and hearing. So in animals back in the caveman days and the early formation of man, the way our power of smell, our olfactory organ, was more important to us than what we could see and what we could hear. We could smell danger before we could see it and hear it. Obviously the other senses developed much later. So this session concludes with Transformational Exercise 9, experimenting with emotional expression. Try this for fun. Try this exercise. On the page within the course notes, there is a list of emotions and feelings. Find a place where you can experience quiet, uninterrupted peace. And as you look at the emotions on the list, select an emotion to play with. Soak up the emotion in your mind. Think of circumstances or people that allow you to experience that emotion, and invite the emotion into your mind, whether it invokes a positive or a negative quality. Allow each emotion you select to become your friend. The more deeply you role play with each emotion, the more you'll become aware of the physiological effects and changes that each emotion creates within you. After you've done this and can feel the emotion fully in your body, say to yourself, I feel excited or I feel shy. Make a note of how the emotion made you feel. Notice how much of the emotion is conveyed through the words, not to judge yourself, but to get more comfortable with the full emotional expression. Some emotions will be fun and easy. Others may be more difficult and painful, dependent upon the memories that they invoke. It all depends on what your past experiences have been. Many emotions will bring up memories for you, which is wonderful and healthy. The more open you are to feeling whatever is there for you, the more transformed and healed you will become. Each emotion is a treasure, a gift to experience for you to broaden the quality of your life. When you get comfortable with the emotions, try using it constructively. Use 3 simple words like I feel happy with someone you're close to. Children are wonderful to practice on. They will understand and respond well to this. Focus on the emotional content. You can even express the emotion without words. Then practice it with adults as well. Don't be attached to others' responses. Focus on enjoying your own expression. That is this purpose. It's for your health, truth, and expressing who you are. Whatever others do with your expression is up to them. Truth attracts truth. Your true and pure expression of emotion will most likely stimulate some kind of inner emotional truth for them as well. It may be fear, anger, delight, or defensiveness. Whatever the response is, appreciate what is unfolding in them and in front of you. You might also use this list to check in with yourself periodically throughout the day to ask yourself, what am I feeling now? See if you can identify the feeling, or just refer to the list to find an emotion that fits. Another way to use this list is like a game of emotional charades. One person acts out the emotion, while the other person guesses what the emotion is. You can do this between lovers to add emotional depth to the relationship. Also, it'll help you to teach your children to identify their own feelings. The bottom line is to have fun and learn as much as you can about yourself. Good luck with the exercise, have fun, and we'll see you in the next session of the course.